Welcome back to our study on the book of Romans. This is the Sonship Review Part 8, and this is session 38, right? Okay. Let's get back to these questions. I got carried away with that further than I really meant to, and there was certainly nothing in the notes about that. To answer these questions, Paul is going to go to the book of Isaiah, and he's going to begin by saying, as it is written. So it's something is sitting back there. So here it is in Romans 10:15. How shall they preach except they be sent? As it is written, and here's the first thing that's not a question so far. How beautiful are the feet of them that preach the gospel of peace and bring glad tidings of good things. Well, where does he get that from? He gets that out of Isaiah. Let's just put that one up with it. Isaiah 52:7. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace, that bringeth good tidings of good, that publisheth salvation, that saith unto Zion, thy God reigneth. So, I said this in your notes, and I hope you understand the way that I said it. It's kind of clumsily put together there. But if you had, to the people who are objecting, who are saying, hey, we didn't call him because we didn't believe in him, because we didn't hear about him, because no preacher told us, because God didn't send anybody. If you read Isaiah 52:7 to them, they would have said, yeah, that's what we need. We need someone who will bring us the good tidings, who will publish this message. That's what we needed. That's what we're saying. You see, they would actually agree with that. And because what they're saying is that God didn't do that. He didn't have that done. But what Paul is going to show them is that indeed God did have that done. And so by referring them to Isaiah 52:7, all right, before I finish that sentence, let me say it this way. If we had studied this Bible beginning in Genesis 1 and come all the way through all 39 books of the Old Testament, come into the Gospels, moved our way through Acts, and now we're into Romans, when you see what Paul is referring to here by quoting Isaiah 52, there would be something that would be working in our mind, because we would have already been through Isaiah, that would tell us that he is actually referring to preachers who are going to come into Israel and preach those glad tidings. Israel, all right, let me just ask it this way. God sent any prophets to Israel? What did they do with them? Yeah, they killed them, they beat them, they pushed them out of their society, they ignored them. They did. They slaughtered those guys, and those that they didn't kill, they maligned them so that no one would dare pay attention to what they were saying. Attacked their character, called them lunatics. By the way, that was something that Paul was accused of being a lunatic. He didn't have a sound mind. People are looking at that and making those kind. Well, here's the funny thing. While they would look at Isaiah 52 and say, yeah, that's what we're talking about. We needed someone to come and do that. What they needed to remember was, when God did that, those people didn't go, oh, yay, we got glad tidings of good things. They went, we got to get rid of this guy, because he's not saying what we want to hear. That's not what we want. Now, the problem back then wasn't that God didn't send anyone, is that the people in Israel, they didn't want to obey what they were hearing. Now, I'm fixing to take us over to Luke chapter 11. And because we're going to make this point, Paul is going to make this point, that the problem isn't that no one showed up to tell you. The problem is you rejected the message of those who showed up. Now, Jesus is about to go to the cross, and he's going to make a statement. We're going to go look at it here in the book of Luke, and it's about the messengers that God is going to send to Israel. And he starts out by saying that in the past, God sent prophets to Israel. We just talked about that issue. But let's look at this now. Woe unto you, for you build the sepulchres of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. Therefore also said the wisdom of God, I will send them prophets and apostles, and some of them they shall slay and persecute, that the blood of all the prophets which was shed from the foundation of the world may be required at this generation. Well, wait a minute. What generation is that? This is just before he goes to the cross. What have we had in a time element? You had the cross. You had the cross. How long was the extension of mercy? 1 year. And now you're over here in the dispensation of grace, and Paul right after that year, what is it? He gets saved on the Damascus Road, right? And now he's been preaching this. Now he's recording it in the book of Romans. The people that are here, I'm not saying no one died in that year and the time up to that, but you know what? You've got this whole group right here. They're the ones that saw Jesus on the cross. They're the ones that had the extension of mercy immediately following that. And so he's saying, you know what? The blood of the prophets, well, let's just read it again. Verse 50, that the blood of all the prophets which was shed from the foundation of the world may be required of this generation. In other words, he says, you guys you're responsible for way more than you think you are. And it's not because you didn't hear or God didn't send anybody, because look back up at the beginning of this. It says, verse 49, therefore also said the wisdom of God, I will send them prophets and apostles. And then he says, and I know what you're going to do. You're going to persecute and slay them. Those apostles, they are the apostles that were sent forth to them in the extension of mercy. How do you know that? Look at how he says it. He says, look, in the past, verse 47, he said, look, you build the sepulchres of the prophets and your fathers killed them. That's in the past. Now look at verse 49. I know we skipped 48, but I'm just putting all the relevant verses together. Therefore also said the wisdom of God, I will send them. Now what is that? That's a future thing, right? I will send them prophets and apostles. Well, you know what? That is true. And during that extension of mercy, did the apostles have a message for Israel? Of course they did. And those guys did not get received well. Some people heard that. They're the members of the remnant, but for the most part, the nation certainly rejected all of that. So, now I'm going to take you back to Isaiah chapter 52, because look, maybe I should talk about this just for a moment. I was going to just skip it and let you read it in your notes, but in order for us to really understand the details of what the Lord is talking about here, there are 3 issues we would need to be very familiar with. There was a time when the Lord pronounced a series of woes to Israel. In the old days, because I didn't know anything, I looked at that and I knew when the Lord said, woe unto you because of this, that was a bad thing and it was kind of a reprimand. But I didn't know what those woes were connected to. That they were actually, each one of them connected to something. There are I'm just trying to think. I don't want to go all the way back with this thing. In fact, that's what the paragraph was about. We're not going to stop here and go back and fill all of this in. This is one of those things where if we'd start at the beginning and come all the way through, we'd have this working in our mind. The vain religious system that was in place at the time that Jesus was having his earthly ministry, it was not something that had just come out of the blue. It was started way back, and it had been growing itself all during those 400 years of silence. When John the Baptist shows up and then Jesus right after him, that thing is already going. And what happens is, if you look back in Israel's history, actually going back to the captivity at the 5th course of punishment, you will see that there are actually phases of the vain religious system in which it is gaining ground and is becoming more predominant, and it is actually becoming more evil. It's kind of developing and maturing in what what Satan is doing with it. And so in this vain religious system here, you know what? It is rejecting Jesus, and it is rejecting the gospel of the kingdom, and it is rejecting the message of the apostles. It's rejecting all of that. And what I said here is that to really see all of the ins and outs here, we'd have to go back and kind of follow the progression of that vain religious system. We have to understand those woes that Jesus was talking about and what they're connected to. There's something that happens at the Mount of Transfiguration that we would need to understand, because that connects to that as well. And when Jesus, remember when he's going back and forth in Jerusalem the days before the crucifixion, and he sees the fig tree and there's no fruit on it, and he curses the fig tree, and they come back through later and it's all withered up and died. There are issues tied to all of that that has to do with what we're talking about here. And I know that we have never gone back and looked at all those details. One day we will, but I'm just saying that to you. So if you want to go look at those things now in this context, then you can do that. What I do want to do, though, is take us back over to the book of Isaiah, because that's the place Paul quotes in Romans 10. So let's just go to that one. I'm just trying to tell you there's a lot more at work here than just that. So putting these together again, let me just do it. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings. And then, that's Isaiah 52. And then Romans 10, after they say, you know, how can they preach except they be sent? And then Paul is going to respond, as it's written, how beautiful are the feet of them that preach the gospel of peace and bring glad tidings of good things. The reason for him to bring that up just that way is because what happened back there with Isaiah is the same thing as happening now. God did send preachers then. He did send preachers now. You understand, I'm not saying now, the dispensation of grace. I'm talking about at that time, okay? So he did send them. The apostles were certainly there. And not only did they reject the message before the cross? Sure they did. The Bible talks about the stone which the builders rejected. Who are the builders? The builders were the religious leaders in Israel. This is part of that vain religious system concept. Did they reject the message again during the extension of mercy? Absolutely they rejected that message. And here's what the point is Paul is going to make. And now that we're in the dispensation of grace, you are going to reject it again. Don't do that. That's what he's trying to tell them. The issue here is not that no one came. They came, you killed them. They came, you persecuted them. That's exactly what is going to go on here. And so God, in their own scriptures, told them in advance that this is, look, I just want to be clear about this. In their scriptures, if they looked at those things and understood those things, and by the way, in Jesus' day, or even those religious leaders here, during the dispensation of grace, there were still religious leaders in Israel. If they had said the truth to people, they would have said, sitting back in our own scriptures, God not only told us He was going to send preachers, but here's how we'll know them. And He's going to describe some things about it. And you can start with John the Baptist and you can work that right on through. Wasn't there a description of John given in the scriptures? And where he would be preaching. He wasn't in Jerusalem, he was in the wilderness. And all of that description of him is given. But he's not the only one. The thing I'm trying to say is, they were being taught way back there, here's what God is going to do to give you this message, and here's how to recognize all of that. They didn't care about that. They only cared about this religious system that they had in operation. And so Paul is making the point that God did send some preachers. And let me ask you a question. You realize how small the nation of Israel is, right? That country is really tiny. Tiny. When, I know I've drawn this 100 times, you could do it too, but look, let me just show you something. With the Sea of Galilee up here, we went down, look, when I was over there in 2004, Mount Nebo sits right there, and then over here sits Jerusalem, and Bethlehem is right down here. I'm trying to think what else is over there. When you stand up here and you're looking down on the Jordan River, you can look out, and these are not the only ones. I'm just trying to think. Nazareth, maybe. That might be wrong. You can stand right up here and you can see those cities. Now, at its narrowest point across there, you're talking about less than 40 miles. That's less than from here to Odessa. And as far as the length of the country, come on. I drive further than that every Tuesday, going to Glen Rose. In fact, I don't just drive more than that. I drive almost twice that much one way. That's almost like driving from here to Abilene. And so, in a day, we were down in here, and then we wound up here at the headwaters of where the Jordan is coming out. I mean, where the Sea of Galilee is. I mean, we were in all of that in a single day. This is not a big country. My question is this. If a man shows up who is able to do the things that Jesus is doing, what were the kinds of things he was doing? How about healing the blind? How about the lame being able to walk again? How about raising someone from the dead? How about feeding 5,000? How about walking on water? How about all the things that he's doing? Do you think the word got around about that? See, I know there's no internet and no social media. I get that. Nobody's Facebooking about Jesus. And nobody's got their cell phone out to video him while he's doing stuff. But they're eyewitnesses of it. And if you saw a guy, I mean, look, he fed 5,000? That's a fair crowd, right? And you're watching him take a few loaves and fishes and break it and break it and break it until everybody's fed. And at the end, there's 12 baskets. By the way, there's a reason for 12. 12 basketfuls left over. When you went home and someone said, well, what was that meeting with that Jesus guy like? You go, same old, same old. Is that how you do it? No. You'd be going, you won't believe. The next time, I almost want to put it in the vernacular of the day, he's having another rally on Thursday. The people that heard the first group talk about it, you know what they'd be wanting to do? I'm going to get over there and see this next time. I want to see that. All right, my only point here is to say, because we're fixing to look at these verses, did they know who he was? This is part of the objection. We couldn't call on him because we didn't believe in him. The reason we didn't believe in him is because we didn't hear of him. We never heard anything. So let's run through these verses here for a moment, because God absolutely wasn't trying to do this where no one could know about it. He was publishing it. He was making it known. So Matthew chapter 9, verse 18. While he spake these things unto them, behold, there came a certain ruler and worshipped him, saying, My daughter is even now dead, but come and lay thy hand upon her, and she shall live. And Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. By the way, how would this guy even know to come to Jesus unless he had heard something? And by the way, That's a pretty significant request, isn't it? It's not, my daughter is sick, can you keep her from dying? It is, my daughter is even now dead. How many other people you reckon this guy went to with this request? No one. No one. What in the world would he have to be thinking to make him come to Jesus and say, my daughter is dead, I need you to come and fix that? What's got to be in his mind? Yeah, that evidently something has happened before that he's either heard about or seen that makes him think he could do this. So he comes and he says that, and Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. Now verse 23, and when Jesus came into the ruler's house and saw the minstrels and the people making a noise, he said unto them, give place, for the maid is not dead, but sleepeth. Now when he says that, look at their reaction. And they laughed him to scorn. Why did they laugh at that? Why did they scorn him for saying that? Because they believed that she was... Now, Jesus is making a statement here not to say that, oh, you know what, she's just passed out and you think she's dead, but she's not dead. He's making a statement about something else. Is she dead? I believe she is. But, verse 25, but when the people were put forth, he went in and took her by the hand, and the maid arose. Even if you want to say that she was just in a coma, he walked in and took her by the hand, and she got up. I'd say that's significant, wouldn't you? Yeah. How many folks would love to have that available? And the fame hereof went abroad into all that land. Do you reckon the news got out about that? When she gets up and when she walks out of there, and every one of those folks who thought that she was dead and laughed at him, when they saw that, you reckon they talked about it to anybody? You better believe they did. And that news got around. Here's the next one, Matthew chapter 9, verse 27. And when Jesus departed thence, 2 blind men followed him, crying and saying, Thou Son of David, have mercy on us. Wait a minute. They're calling him the Son of David. That is significant. Who is the Son of David? They're not just saying you're a descendant of David. He was in his genealogy. But the Son of David. He's the Messiah. He's the one that's going to sit on David's throne and rule the earth. They know that. And when he was cut, by the way, how could 2 blind men know about this? They're no doubt hearing people talk about it. And no doubt they're hearing the debate about it, aren't they? There's plenty of people saying, he's not the Son of David, he's just a charlatan, he's just a faker. I mean, his mother said she was a virgin when she gave birth to him. And can you hear all that? But they're making a decision about that, so they know who he is. Thou Son of David, have mercy on us. And when he was come into the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus saith unto him, Believe ye that I am able to do this? They said unto him, Yea, what? Lord. See, they're way ahead of the Pharisees. They know exactly who he is. Then touched he their eyes, saying, According to your faith be it unto you. And their eyes were opened. And Jesus straightly charged them, saying, See that no man know it. Now he tells them at this point, by the way, you see where you are, something has already happened here in his public ministry. And he says, don't say anything about this. But they, when they were departed, what did they do? They told everybody. I love that. Barbara said it perfectly. They just told everybody. I can't really blame them. These guys were blind, and now they have sight. You know what? Man, I got to tell you, that'd be tough. Don't tell anybody. By the way, wouldn't people know, even if they didn't go out and purposely just tell it, there'd be somebody when, here's a blind guy reaching down and picking up something and turning it over, and they'd be going, Hey, what are you doing? Thought you were blind. Well, I was till about 30 minutes ago. What happened 30 minutes ago? Okay, since you asked. I mean, I'm sure all kinds of things like that are happening. But here's the point. Spread abroad his fame. Spread abroad. Look, you think anybody that met those guys that day and saw that they now had sight? How many fingers am I holding up? How many now? How many now? Wouldn't you be doing that to them? It's got to be a trick. Is anybody doing this? How many now? How many now? And because they can see, you know what? You'd be going home. If Milt went home to Barbara that night and she'd be going, anything interesting happened today? Nah, those two guys are blind. They can see now. Nah. He'd be going, you won't believe it. Well, who did that? That Jesus character. Really? All right, so here's the next one. What I got left here? Matthew 13:54, and when he was come to his own country, he taught them in their synagogue, insomuch that they were astonished, and said, whence hath this man this wisdom and these mighty works? It has to be pretty astonishing to have them think that way and to talk about it that way. How about Matthew 14:1? At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard of the fame of Jesus. Now we know who Herod is. He's the big shot over there. And he heard of the fame of Jesus. How you reckon he heard? People are talking about it, right? People are talking, and then his guys are out there hearing about it, and they come, they give him a report. He hears about the fame of Jesus. Now, let's see. Surely I didn't just leave that there. I guess I did. Mark 1:23. And there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, let us alone. What have we to do with thee, thou Jesus of Nazareth? Art thou come to destroy us? I know thee who thou art, the Holy One of God. Now, can you imagine? Here's a guy with an unclean spirit, and this is what he's saying. Verse 25, and Jesus rebuked him, saying, hold thy peace, and come out of him. And when the unclean spirit had torn him, and cried with a loud voice, he came out of him. And they were all amazed, insomuch that they questioned among themselves, saying, what thing is this? And what new doctrine is this? For with authority commanded he even the unclean spirits, and they do obey him. Now they're blown away by this. And then look at the end of it. And immediately his fame spread abroad throughout all the region round about Galilee. Now you start hearing these stories, and you start wondering, wait a minute. This is the guy that raised the ruler's daughter from the dead? And then you hear the story of these two blind guys, and now they're healed. And then he amazes them with his teaching in the synagogue. That they're saying, where did this come from? And then you hear that the unclean spirits obey him and are subject to him. You know, after a while, you keep hearing it and hearing it and hearing it and hearing it. After a while, wouldn't that make you stop and think, who is he? What I'd be interested in knowing is, those two blind guys, who did they think he was? The son of David. He was the Lord. Man, you know, this thing, all I'm saying is, I'm showing you all this to say, because part of their whole thing is, it is so unfair for God to blame us for not believing in him because we didn't get to hear about him. You got to be kidding, right? What rock were you living under? But Paul is going to get more specific than that. We'll see it when we come back after the break.